A legendary conflict. Drachenfels collaboration in 1792, the flames of the French Revolution ignited a European struggle that would shape history for a generation. A relentless contest for dominance over land and sea. Amid shifting alliances, one rivalry endured above all: France versus Britain. While Britain could not match France's power on land, the seas told a different story. The Royal Navy, as formidable on the waves as Napoleon was on the battlefield, stood as Britain's greatest defense. And in an age filled with skilled commanders, one name would rise above the rest: Horatio Nelson. A hero forged in battle, bold, inspiring, and brilliant, Nelson became a national hero, a legend in his own time. His victories defined an era, and this is the story of his greatest battles. By 1805, the brief peace between Britain and France had collapsed once more. The Third Coalition, comprising Britain, Russia, and Austria, stood against Napoleon, who had strengthened his alliance with Spain. Now crowned Emperor of the French, Napoleon was determined to crush Britain, the nation that funded his enemies, crippled French trade, and blockaded his ports. On the Channel coast, he gathered a massive invasion force. His seasoned troops would make quick work of Britain if he could seize control of the Channel long enough to land them. Napoleon's grand strategy: despite Britain's naval superiority, its fleet could not be everywhere at once. Napoleon sought to exploit this with one of his favorite military doctrines: concentration of force. His plan was to unite scattered French and Spanish squadrons from multiple ports into a formidable combined fleet, one powerful enough to challenge British dominance. For the first phase of this ambitious operation, Napoleon entrusted command to Admiral Pierre Villeneuve. A seasoned officer, Villeneuve had joined the Navy at just 14, fighting in the American War of Independence. Unlike many aristocrats, he remained loyal to the Revolution, rising to the rank of Rear Admiral. In 1798, he commanded the 80-gun Guillaume Tell at the Battle of the Nile, one of the few French ships to escape disaster. Captured during Malta's fall, he was later freed when peace was declared. By 1804, he had been promoted to Vice Admiral, replacing the late commander of the French Mediterranean Fleet. But Villeneuve was nothing like Nelson. Reserved and pragmatic, he once wrote to the Minister of the Navy, "You will recall that I did not ask for this command. I have always sought a practical and useful career rather than one driven by glory." The chase across the Atlantic on March 30th, 1805, following Napoleon's orders, Villeneuve set sail from Toulon with 11 ships of the line, evading Nelson's blockade. Off Cadiz, he joined 6 Spanish ships and another French vessel, assembling a fleet of 18 warships. With these forces, he embarked on a grueling 5-week journey across the Atlantic. Upon reaching the French West Indies, he linked up with 2 more ships under Rear Admiral Magan, further bolstering his strength. Meanwhile, the British were in disarray. Nelson, mistakenly believing Villeneuve was headed for Egypt, raced to Alexandria, only to find nothing. Realizing his error, he doubled back, setting a course for the West Indies, but by then, he was a month behind. He made the crossing in an astonishing 4 weeks, yet narrowly missed Villeneuve, who had already turned back for Europe on June 8th. But then, a stroke of luck. A British ship carrying Nelson's reports to England accidentally sighted Villeneuve's fleet in the Atlantic. Its course was not toward the Mediterranean, as Nelson had assumed, but northward, toward the Channel. The Battle of Cape Finisterre, Vice Admiral Calder, commanding 15 British ships of the line, was placed on high alert. On July 22nd, he intercepted Villeneuve off Cape Finisterre. Fighting in heavy fog, the British managed to capture 2 Spanish ships, though Calder failed to stop Villeneuve from reaching the Spanish port of Ferrol. Then came a fateful decision. Villeneuve's orders were clear: proceed to Brest, then sail into the Channel. But reports of British ships to the north shook his confidence. Fearing an encounter with Britain's powerful Channel fleet, and with his ships battered by Atlantic storms and battle, Villeneuve decided his fleet was in no condition to fight. Instead of pressing on, he retreated to Cadiz, a decision that would seal his fate. The clash at Trafalgar. A decisive battle unfolds As Admiral Villeneuve sought refuge in Cadiz, his fleet soon found itself trapped under the watchful blockade of the British Royal Navy. With each passing day, more British warships joined the encirclement. When Napoleon received news of this humiliating stalemate, his frustration boiled over. Villeneuve does not even have the strength of character to command a frigate, he spat at his naval minister. By now, summer was fading, and with it, any hope of a cross-channel invasion. Villeneuve had failed him. Napoleon was forced to abandon his plans, turning his focus to a different battlefield. In late August, his armies broke camp at Boulogne and marched eastward, preparing to crush the Austrians and Russians along the Danube. A desperate gamble even as Napoleon shifted his strategy. He ordered Villeneuve to set sail for the Mediterranean, where his fleet would support French operations in Italy. But the Franco-Spanish fleet was in dire condition, crippled by shortages of supplies and men, and still blockaded by Nelson's powerful fleet. Villeneuve hesitated. He knew his ships were not battle-ready. But when word arrived that he was being replaced, humiliation spurred him into action. On October 18, 1805, he ordered his 33 ships of the line, 18 French, 15 Spanish, to put to sea. His flagship, Bucentaur, an 80-gun warship, led the charge. The Spanish contingent, commanded by Admiral Gravina, sailed aboard the mighty 112-gun Príncipe de Asturias. Nelson had been watching and waiting. His 34-ship fleet had been patrolling off Cadiz for weeks, but just before Villeneuve's departure, he had sent 6 ships to Gibraltar for resupply. Now, he was left with only 27 ships against Villeneuve's 33. Yet Nelson was not concerned. While the French and Spanish had the numbers, the British had the advantage where it mattered most: superior seamanship, faster gunnery, and battle-hardened crews. A battle in the making after 8 weeks in Cadiz, Villeneuve was finally at sea, but under disastrous conditions. He had given his captains little warning, forcing them to set sail in weak, shifting winds. His fleet crawled south along the Spanish coast, unaware that British frigates had already spotted them. The British immediately relayed the news to Nelson, patrolling 40 miles offshore. He wasted no time. He set course to intercept. On the morning of October 21st, Villeneuve's fleet was about 10 miles northwest of Cape Trafalgar, making for the Straits of Gibraltar. But then, disaster struck. The British fleet was sighted closing in from the northwest. Villeneuve hesitated. Should he flee to the Mediterranean or face battle? At the last moment, he made a fatal decision. He ordered his fleet to turn back toward Cadiz. This abrupt change threw his already disorganized fleet into further chaos. With light winds and inexperienced crews, his ships fell into a ragged crescent formation, stretched across 5 miles of open sea. Psychologically and tactically, Villeneuve's fleet was already beaten. Nelson's masterstroke, by contrast, the British fleet was brimming with confidence. Nelson's men were eager for battle, and their commander had devised a bold and unconventional plan, one that would annihilate the enemy. Conventional tactics dictated that fleets line up side by side and exchange broadsides. But Nelson disdained this cautious approach. He believed such battles often ended indecisively. Instead, he planned to attack in 2 columns, cutting straight through Villeneuve's fleet, breaking it into smaller, isolated sections to be destroyed one by one. The greatest risk was that during their slow approach, his leading ships would be under heavy fire, unable to return fire until they reached the enemy line. Yet Nelson never hesitated. He would lead the first column himself, aboard HMS Victory. The second would be commanded by Vice Admiral Collingwood, aboard HMS Royal Sovereign. The battle begins as the British fleet closed in. Nelson signaled his famous message to the men: "England expects that every man will do his duty." The wind was light, and the British ships crawled forward at 3 knots, barely faster than a walking pace. The lead ships would be under fire for 45 agonizing minutes before reaching the enemy. At noon, the battle erupted. The French 74-gun Fougueux fired the first shots at HMS Royal Sovereign. Soon, the entire Franco-Spanish fleet opened fire, the sea echoing with the thunder of cannon. But their gunnery was undisciplined and rushed. The French and Spanish lacked practice, and their ships, rolling unsteadily in the waves, missed their marks. Meanwhile, Nelson gave a new signal from victory: engage the enemy more closely. The British had held their fire throughout the long approach, but now it was time to strike back. Devastating broadsides, Collingwood's HMS Royal Sovereign was the first to reach the enemy line. At 12:30, she unleashed a devastating broadside into the stern of the Spanish flagship, Santa Ana. Minutes later, HMS Victory followed, delivering a crippling broadside into Villeneuve-Centaur. The impact was catastrophic. Half the crew on the French flagship was killed or wounded in an instant. Despite these shattering blows, the battle was far from over. The British vanguard was still outnumbered, struggling to hold on. HMS Royal Sovereign was under fire from all directions. HMS Belle-Isle had been completely demasted. HMS Mars was being pounded by relentless cannon fire. As HMS Victory became entangled with Redoutable, fierce hand-to-hand combat erupted. French Marines swarmed the decks, trying to board Nelson's flagship. The British had no choice but to fight in brutal close-quarters combat, waiting for reinforcements to turn the tide of battle. The fight for Trafalgar had only just begun. The final hours of Trafalgar, victory and tragedy for 20 relentless minutes. The British fleet surged into the heart of the battle. One by one, their ships joined the fray, hammering the disorganized enemy formation with devastating double-shot broadsides. HMS Victory, locked in brutal close-quarters combat with the French Redoutable, now received crucial support from HMS Temeraire. Chaos reigned as more British ships poured into the fight. This was exactly the battle Nelson had envisioned. The Franco-Spanish fleet, trapped, unable to escape, pummeled at point-blank range. Meanwhile, Admiral Dumanoir's vanguard began an agonizingly slow turn, trying to rejoin the fight. But their movements were too little, too late. They would not be in position for another hour. A lone ship's defiant charge far from the main fleet, HMS Africa, a 64-gun third-rate, had been separated earlier in the day. But her captain, Henry Digby, refused to play it safe. Misinterpreting, or rather, deliberately ignoring, Nelson's order to withdraw, he charged straight into battle from the north, sailing past the entire enemy vanguard, exchanging furious broadsides as he went. He then joined the assault against the gigantic Santissima Trinidad, the most heavily armed ship in the world with 136 guns. At the center of the battle, Victory and Redoutable remained locked in a desperate struggle. The British guns tore the French hull to splinters, while Redoutable's Marines gathered on deck, ready to board Victory and overwhelm her crew. Temeraire's timely intervention at this critical moment, HMS Temeraire swept in on Redoutable's starboard side. Her cannons roared, spewing grape shot across the enemy deck, mowing down the French boarding party in seconds. The three massive ships, Victory, Redoutable, and Temeraire, became entangled, drifting helplessly into another French vessel, Fougueuse. The battle turned into a brutal close-quarters melee, where some Franco-Spanish crews, hardened by training, fought ferociously. But time and again, just as a French or Spanish crew assembled to board, a British ship emerged through the smoke, unleashing devastating grape-shot barges that swept their decks clean. Superior British gunnery was grinding the enemy down. The shot that changed history one by one, French and Spanish ships began to surrender, hauling down their colors in defeat. But at the height of the battle, a French sniper, perched high in Redoutable's mizzenmast, spotted Nelson standing on Victory's quarterdeck. His gold-encrusted uniform, which his officers had urged him to remove, made him an easy target. A single musket ball pierced his shoulder, plowed through his spine, and left him mortally wounded. "They have finally succeeded," Nelson murmured. "I am dead." His men rushed him below deck for medical treatment. Even as life slipped from his body, he continued to request updates on the battle. The final hours of Trafalgar, 3 hours into the battle, the carnage reached its climax. To the south, the French 74-gun Achille, set ablaze by relentless British fire, became an inferno. To the north, Dumanoir's vanguard finally reached the battlefield, but only one ship, Intrepide, made a determined attack. The others fired a few ineffective long-range shots before turning away, unwilling to engage the British in close action. On board one captured Spanish ship, the crew, disgusted by their allies' cowardice, even offered to open fire on their fellow Franco-Spanish fleet. But it was too late. The French commanders could see the disaster unfolding. Villeneuve's fleet was annihilated. Nelson's final moments as news of total British victory spread. Nelson lay dying in the orlop deck of Victory. His closest friend, Captain Hardy, knelt beside him. "Take care of my dear Lady Hamilton," Nelson whispered. Then, with his last breath, he said, "Thank God I have done my duty." Moments later, Britain's greatest admiral was dead. A devastating aftermath at 6 p.m. on the southern edge of the battlefield. The flames aboard Achille reached her powder magazine. In an instant, the ship erupted in a cataclysmic explosion, obliterating half her crew. It was a fittingly spectacular and bloody finale to a battle that had already claimed 5,000 lives. As the smoke cleared, it was evident Trafalgar was an overwhelming British triumph. Of the 33 French and Spanish ships under Villeneuve's command, 17 were captured, 1 was destroyed, and the rest fled. In contrast, no British ships had been lost, though many bore deep scars of battle. Among the thousands of prisoners, Admiral Villeneuve was taken captive. Though later released, he died mysteriously 6 months later. Whether by suicide or assassination, history remains uncertain. Admiral Gravina, Spain's commander, died of his wounds months later. Yet for the British, victory was bittersweet. Their greatest hero had perished in battle. The wrath of the storm before his death, Nelson had ordered the fleet to drop anchor, warning of bad weather ahead. His instincts proved right. A ferocious Atlantic storm erupted, battering the victorious fleet and its many captured prizes. For days, howling winds and raging seas tore through the battle-scarred ships, scattering them across miles of ocean. The French and Spanish saw an opportunity. They attempted to recapture some of their seized ships, and even succeeded, temporarily. 4 captured ships were seized back by their crews, but 3 were wrecked on the shore before they could escape. Despite their best efforts, the British managed to save only 4 of the 17 captured ships. The rest were either burned or lost to the storm, which, in the end, likely claimed more French and Spanish lives than the battle itself. The final blow to France for Napoleon's navy, the disaster only worsened. 2 weeks later, Dumanoir and his 4 remaining ships, the ones that had fled the battle, were intercepted by Captain Strachan's squadron off Cape Ortegal. The result was inevitable. All 4 French ships were captured. For Britain, it was the final seal on Trafalgar's triumph. Nelson's body was returned to England aboard HMS Victory, preserved in a cask of brandy lashed to the mainmast. No non-royal Briton had received a state funeral since the Duke of Marlborough, 83 years earlier. For 3 days, his body lay in Greenwich Hospital, where thousands came to pay their respects. Then, a solemn funeral procession led him through London to St. Paul's Cathedral. The scale of the tribute was staggering. 32 admirals, 189 carriages, and thousands of soldiers followed his flag-draped coffin, which was crafted from the timbers of the French warship Loria. As the world mourned, news of Trafalgar finally reached Napoleon, near Vienna, 4 weeks too late. His navy lay in ruins. His dream of invading Britain had been crushed forever. Trafalgar had redrawn the map of naval warfare, ensuring British dominance of the seas for the next century. And at its heart stood the memory of one man, Horatio Nelson, Britain's immortal admiral. Trafalgar's legacy, the battle that changed history as Napoleon marched toward his greatest triumph at Austerlitz, securing victory over the Russians and Austrians. Another battle in 1805 was set to reshape the course of history. While Austerlitz would cement Napoleon's dominance on land, Trafalgar's impact would prove far more enduring. The Battle of Trafalgar was one of the most decisive naval victories in history. It did not prevent an invasion of Britain. That threat had already faded, but it ensured that British supremacy at sea would remain unchallenged for the rest of the Napoleonic Wars. With the destruction of his fleet, Napoleon was forced to seek alternative ways to defeat Britain, a path that would lead to strategic blunders and, ultimately, his own downfall. For Britain, Trafalgar was more than just a victory. It was the foundation of a century of global dominance. The Royal Navy's supremacy became the backbone of the British Empire, allowing it to expand its influence across continents. No serious naval challenge to British power would arise until the Battle of Jutland, more than a century later. The future of history content, a commitment to quality with the rapid rise of AI-generated content. Have you noticed a decline in the quality of online videos? Perhaps you've seen an influx of generic scripts, robotic narration, and historically inaccurate imagery. At Epic History, we take a different approach. We are committed to maintaining the highest standards of authenticity, ensuring that real historians, skilled writers, and experienced animators bring every project to life. From meticulous research to carefully crafted scripts and narration, every element of our content is made with precision and passion. If you're tired of sifting through low-quality AI-generated content in search of something truly engaging, perhaps it's time to explore Nebula, a prestige streaming platform dedicated to high-quality, human-made videos. Nebula offers a curated selection of expert-driven content, spanning science, technology, history, true crime, and more. With hundreds of creators producing original documentaries and in-depth series, you're guaranteed to find something that matches your interests. For history lovers, Real-Time History delivers exceptional military documentaries, including recent episodes on Desert Storm, the Vietnam War, and their latest release, U-Boats Unleashed, the Battle of the Atlantic 1940. Just like our own videos, all Nebula content is available ad-free to subscribers before it's released anywhere else. Nebula is more than just a streaming platform. It's a creator-led project designed to provide a better alternative to mainstream video platforms. And by subscribing, you're directly supporting channels like ours, helping us produce even more ambitious and high-quality history content. Right now, Epic History viewers can take advantage of a special discount. Use the link in the video description to get 40% off Nebula's annual plan. That's just $36 per year, or $3 per month. If you're looking for unlimited, lifetime access, Nebula's lifetime plan is available for a one-time payment of $300, supporting more creator-owned series. A huge thank you to all our existing Nebula subscribers. And for those considering joining, we hope to see you there soon. A special thanks to our experts and patrons. A heartfelt thank you to Drachenfell, whose expert research and insights have been invaluable throughout our Nelson's Battle series. His YouTube channel is an essential destination for naval history enthusiasts, featuring in-depth ship profiles, advanced naval tactics, and historical discussions. We're also immensely grateful to Jack Fine Art and the estate of Derek Gardner for allowing us to feature his stunning painting of Trafalgar in this video. You can view more of his incredible artwork through the link in the description. Finally, a massive thank you to our Patreon supporters, whose continued support makes this channel possible. From builders like Trey Tatro, Ellington Total War, and Neil Dinkra, to citizens like Casual Donor, OM, and Drew, and heroes like William Fowler. You are the driving force behind what we do. If you'd like to join their ranks, consider supporting us on Patreon, where you'll get early, ad-free access to our latest videos, exclusive behind-the-scenes updates, and even the opportunity to vote on future topics.